tell me what you believe, show me what you have done,
That's right.
and then I will tell you what you believe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Reverend Christopher Johnson, for the invitation. You're not a politician, although you do speak as long as politicians. But I appreciate the invitation. I will always respond to an invitation from the 12th Congressional District because I spent so much time working in this part of the state for Congressman John Barrow, for the Democratic Party of Georgia, over the last 15 years. I actually moved to Georgia in 2005. I got involved in a Sierra Club campaign in Atlanta, canvassing door to door for this crazy idea called the Beltline, which some of y'all may have heard of that, but there's cities all across Georgia that are investing in walking and biking infrastructure. I actually got arrested going door to door in the wealthy neighborhood of Buckhead in Atlanta. Spent 9 hours in the Atlanta criminal justice system, got bailed out at 2 a.m., and went back to that exact same neighborhood that next day because we weren't going to quit. I then went to work for the state Democratic Party, and I actually came first to Statesboro way back in 2008 for the delegate selection process. Then I trained some of y'all in this room on how to use this newfangled database called Vote Builder. How it was going to help us be better targeters and better canvassers and turn out the votes. And I think we've used that to our success in the last 10 years. I then went to work for Congressman John Barrow. I literally worked from him for 2 election cycles, from 2009 up until the end of 2011. Every time that he was in the district, it would either be we would start in Athens, the very top, not out of the district, or in Savannah at 7 a.m. And we would go from then all the way to about 9 p.m. every single day that he was in the district, raising money, doing meetings. And so I got a chance really to go to every single corner of what at the time was a little bit different map. You know, the 12th has probably been the most gerrymandered district in America in the last decade. So the map's changed a little bit. I went from there to run a statewide campaign for the Public Service Commission. We ran on one particular issue, and that was that solar energy is good for Georgia. Georgia's #1 natural resource is the sun, and it's time that we invest in it. From there, I ran for mayor of the city of Clarkston, Georgia. Clarkston is known as the most ethnically diverse square mile in America. Now, the town's only about 1 square mile. So I say we're known as because I can't actually prove it to you. In fact, actually, I was at the United Nations a couple of years ago with a group of mayors from all over the world talking about migration and refugee issues that their cities and communities were facing. And I was in a room and I got up and did my spiel about Clarkston's the most ethnically diverse square mile. And I sat there and everyone was, that's very impressive. And then Mayor Bill de Blasio got up and he said, well, 4 stops on a Queens subway line. He's the most ethnically diverse. So that's probably accurate there. I'll get on that one. But Clarkston has been welcoming refugees, asylum seekers, immigrants for the last 40 plus years. People from 40 nationalities speaking 60 different languages. We have proven, not just during my time, but over the last several decades, that our diversity is our strength. Diversity in our ethnicities, our nationalities, our religions. We have every major religion represented in Clarkston. Clarkston was one of the first cities to sign on to the Charter of Compassion, a worldwide interfaith movement, to bring people of all different faiths together around this common principle of compassion for each other. We also proclaimed ourselves a welcoming city, recognizing that as immigration and refugee resettlement went up during the last 2 years of George W. Bush's administration and during Barack Obama's administration, the crime rate in Clarkston went down every single year, and our growth rate went up. Clarkston's actually one of the fastest growing suburbs in the entire country. And I think that's partly for what we represent. The things that we have fought and stood on, our principles in Clarkston, are the things that I want to do for Georgia. Clarkston was the first city in Georgia to decriminalize marijuana possession, an effort to reduce mass incarceration, to end the war on drugs. And I'm proud actually to say that today, 3 years later, over 13 cities around Georgia have adopted our model ordinance to end life-ruining arrests, to make it a ticket-only offense for simple possession. From the big city of Atlanta, to the city of South Fulton, to Chamblee, to Augusta, to Savannah, to soon-to-be Athens, Statesboro, Macon, even the small town of Ludowici, Georgia, have all adopted our ordinance. Clarkston also was the first city to raise our minimum wage to $15 an hour for our city employees. We did that 3 years ago. They've gotten a raise since then, of course. But that $15 minimum wage, if you live in Metro Atlanta, that is a minimum living wage. The rent's too damn high, the utilities, bills are too damn high, healthcare, education, housing, transportation, everything is going up, but the wages are not keeping pace. We also, on that same night actually, in Clarkston, declared that Election Day is a holiday in Clarkston. We believe that people who want to participate in their democracy, volunteer, vote, take their kids to vote, maybe just take the day off. They deserve that opportunity, and we need to have Election Day as a holiday all over the state, in as many states as we can get, but we need to declare it a federal Election Day holiday for everyone to participate in their democracy. Since then, Clarkston has done other progressive things I'm very proud to share with you. We were one of the few cities in Georgia to commit ourselves to 100% clean energy future. And I'll never forget, actually, earlier this year, I was working with the Georgia Sierra Club. That was one of my side hustles. They pay the mayor $6,000 a year in Clarkston, so I got a couple side hustles. But through my work with the Georgia Sierra Club, the largest grassroots environmental group in the country, we've been lobbying the Public Service Commission. And I'll never forget the woman, this lovely woman who came up from Twiggs County. Y'all know where Twiggs County is. It's right next door to the 12. And she works for the Economic Development Authority in Twiggs County. And she came and gave public comment to the all Republican commissioners. She said, we want more solar. Because the last solar investment, large-scale solar farm that y'all did a couple of years ago, doubled our land values and tax digest in one single year. It brought good paying jobs. It brought opportunity where we had not seen any opportunity for decades, creating generational wealth, but also providing additional revenues for their school system. The school system in many parts of our rural Georgia is the #1 employer in those counties, and they are supported by property taxes. It's not only good for the economy, good for local values, but it's also clean energy, because climate change is real. Global warming is happening, and we're paying for it now, whether it's in the increased cost to deal with the cleanup after superstorms, to deal with droughts, floods, increasing migration patterns. We are paying for the cost of climate change, and we have to invest in that now. Clarkston also was the first city earlier this year to approve Georgia's first tiny home neighborhood development. And this is, a lot of people say, that's really cute, Ted. You did a little tiny home neighborhood. Well, where the real people don't live. Well, and I don't know if y'all have seen this in your parts of the 12th, but in Metro Atlanta, all the new housing developments are luxury townhomes, infill McMansions, and high-rise mixed use.
That's right.
No one can afford that if you work in a middle-class job, or certainly a minimum wage. And so what we're doing in Clarkston is we're providing the template for any city and county in Georgia to incentivize a different type of housing. And we call it actually a cottage home ordinance. And what that means is that we're incentivizing between 400 and 1,250 square foot home developments. Now, I live in a home in Clarkston in an old neighborhood that was built in the 1960s. You know how big my home is? It's 1,000 square feet. All right? Home builders, developers aren't building the housing stock that we need. And so Clarkston, again, is trying to lead by example, to show that we can build the future and create affordable housing and do it in a way that actually is accessible to everybody. And then speaking of plastic, Sid, just about 2 weeks ago, Clarkston passed the first commitment to phase out all single-use plastics, non-recyclable, single-use plastics citywide by May of 2021. That not only means the city government switching to all compostable, recyclable materials, but the entire city wide. And we've actually put our money where our mouth is. We have $60,000 in an environmental fund to help businesses make that transition over the next year and a half. We think it's not only good for the environment, we think it's good for our economy as well. Because again, we are paying for the impacts of the environmental pollution, the cleanup costs, the plastics that are in our food that we're eating downstream, and the fish that we eat. We are paying for it right now. Let's begin that transition to respecting our environment and investing in a clean energy, clean transportation, and a clean water, food, and land society for all Georgians and all Americans. I am the progressive candidate in the race. Everyone's progressive, and I respect and love all of the candidates that are running for U.S. Senate. I'm following the Stacey Abrams playbook. If you haven't read the Abrams playbook, she put it out back in August. It's about 16, 17 pages. It's the strategy that she used in what was the highest turnout election for a Democrat in Georgia history. And we would have won that election if it weren't for voter suppression, if it weren't for the purges and the provisional ballots not counted, the mail-in ballots that never got sent. You add all those up and she would have won. And then actually to add a little more insult to that injury, the AJC just did a report 2 days ago. They showed that between 60 and 84,000 people did not vote in 2018 because of polling consolidation.
That's right.
Because people have to travel even farther to go vote. And guess what? With these new voting systems that the Republicans approved, it's going to cost county board of elections even more money to run their elections. It's going to force them to consolidate even more precincts. And so we have our work cut out for us. But the one thing that I think Stacey Abrams showed is that we don't win elections by dragging voters to the polls.
That's right.
We're always in this mindset, we got to drag people to the polls. Oh, I got to go vote. We have to bother them so much to go vote. We need to put up candidates that stand with the voters on the issue so that they're actually going to run to the polls, excited to not only vote for those candidates, but to volunteer, to donate, to help get their circles of people who maybe don't usually vote to turn out and vote. I'm running on Medicare for All. I believe that a universal healthcare system is something that every other developed nation in the world, and even some less developed nations in South America and Africa, provide universal healthcare. And by the way, they do it for less money than we pay currently. America spends twice as much on our healthcare system than any other of these developed nations. If the rest of the world can do it, so can we. I believe in investing in a Green New Deal. Again, a Green New Deal is not only good at stopping climate change and reversing global warming, but it's good for our economy. A Green New Deal for Georgia would mean 150,000 new jobs over the next 25 years. Tens and tens of millions of dollars in every single county in Georgia would see that investment, mostly with solar energy, but also with energy efficiency. Because how do you get to 100% clean energy? Well, you use 50% less energy. And I can tell right here in this college, they're using LED lights, 1/10 of the cost of a normal, even fluorescent or other light bulb. The Rocky Mountain Institute estimated that if we spend $800 billion on energy efficientizing residential, commercial, and industrial sectors of our economy, we would save $1.2 trillion in energy costs, and we would create hundreds of millions of new jobs. I'm working on canceling student debts. All right, now I'm actually lucky. I was on the tail end of the last generation. I'm a zillennial, or what I call an elder millennial. I'm 36 years old.
Sure, you're right. Sure.
I graduated college with virtually no debt. The last 15 years of our young people who are going to college, they're seeing skyrocketing college prices, which means that they're going into the workforce, they're going into the economy, putting most of their income into paying off that debt, not putting into buying a house, a car, investing in a business, investing in their local economies. And when we talk about canceling student debt and providing tuition-free, debt-free college, it doesn't just mean a 4-year college. It means technical colleges, trade schools. It means investing in parts of Georgia where we have a very vibrant technical and Georgia University college system. All right, and this is investments that will go to parts of Georgia that aren't seeing that type of investment. I'm running on a living wage, a $15 minimum wage. The House passed earlier this year a graduated increase to $15 an hour over the next 6 to 7 years. I fully support that. And the last thing that I'll mention that I think is sort of the cornerstone and is the crucial aspect of what we need to be fighting for, that's ending corporate control of our democracy. Citizens United has elevated the amount of money that is spent in our elections to unprecedented levels. Billions of dollars are going into our political system, and they're being controlled by a handful of people that are picking senators, they're picking congresspeople, they're picking state house and state senators as well to pass legislation that only benefits the wealthiest corporations and the wealthiest individuals in our society. Now, I'm not a Pollyanna. I don't think that overturning Citizens United is something that we can just do. Look at the Equal Rights Amendments, all right, 40 years, and hopefully next year the Virginia legislature will be that last state we need to ratify the ERA, and then of course we need a House and a Senate to say that the ratification deadline doesn't end in 1982, it ends whenever we pass it. But I don't want to wait 40 years to end Citizens United. I actually want to wait, I want to immediately balance the playing field. Now there's a program out there, and it's been done in Seattle, New York, and other even smaller cities. It's called a Democracy Bucks program. All right, some version of public financing of elections, but it's more grassroots. It means actually giving a tax credit or a Democracy Bucks to every single one of you. Whether you're a CEO, a teacher, a student, if you're registered to vote, you get a Democracy Buck. And it can range from $100 per person up to $500 or even $1,000. Immediately, people running for office, whether they're running for Congress, Senate, State House, State Senate, they literally can go spend most of their time talking to the people. And once they get their support, they say, hey, would you donate a Democracy Buck to my program, to my campaign? And it further incentivizes candidates to spend more time talking to individual people instead of going to what I do most of my days, calling strangers for money. Or what a lot of incumbents do, a lot of the wealthier candidates do, they spend a lot of time talking to other wealthy people to get the big $1,000, the $5,000 checks. When you spend more time with one group of people, the issues that you fight for are very narrow. And so I want to represent you in the United States Senate. I want to bring courage back to Washington. You don't have to believe what I'm saying. You can look at what I've done in Clarkston, and you know where I stand on the issues. Thank you very much.
Question. How did Clarkston happen? What meaning
This mile square
Yes.
seems to be distinct from its surrounding areas. How did that happen? Was it blessed somehow? In my opinion, most of the things you're saying about Clarkston, I like.
There's a lot of really good documentaries that will give you the 30 minutes to hour version of that. The short version is that Clarkston was a farming town for 60 years. Atlanta grew. A lot of multifamily housing was built. It was a cool place to live in the 70s, but then people kept moving outside to the suburbs. Housing prices sort of cratered. No one was living in Clarkston. Jimmy Carter passed the Refugee Act of 1980, and 300,000 Vietnamese refugees came to America over the span of 5 years. And Clarkston became the resettlement home for thousands of Vietnamese.
So the documentary has already been made?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Very good.
Google Clarkston refugees, you'll get a lot of good input,
Yeah.
and you'll still see me on lots of them too.
Right.
Yeah, on NPR.
Yes.
Maria and Wilson?
Yes. America by the
Is she gonna
numbers.
do a follow-up on Clarkston?
Well, she did do two. She did the first one that launched the series, and she came back for a follow-up, which is a fun one for me because it was the election that I won for mayor in 2013. So that's a fun one. Actually, you'll see me wearing my red tennis shoes. These are new ones, by the way. I literally have knocked so many doors and campaigned so hard that I had to retire my old red sneakers because I literally have cracks in the soles and they're falling apart. But yeah, Maria can host America by the Numbers.
What is your mayoralty term in?
It ends in 2021. But in
Okay.
Georgia, if you qualify for another office, you resign your
Okay.
current office. Yeah, unless you're running again.
I got it.
Yes, Sid.
Yeah, I was talking a little bit earlier, I gave the invocation, had some opening words, democracy bucks, Canadians do something very similar to that, that we campaigned for 2 months, which is kind of cool too. But I was talking about convergence, Ralph Nader's concept, and Debbie Dooley, and the Green Tea Party.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool, and I think you're messaging some of this too, that we have folks that are gonna vote for this for free trade, getting off the grid. The rest of us that are eco-justice folks are wanting to get off the grid for environmental reasons. But I think, we can reach out. We never want to say us and them, dichotomous thinking, they'll never come over their ways. If we message, we can bridge. And I see you doing that so often.
Yeah, and yeah, I've been doing it for almost a decade now. Right now, when you talk about the Green New Deal, people think, oh, you're gonna ban hamburgers and milkshakes. I'm gonna have to take a sailboat to Europe, all right? That's not what it's about, all right? And when you talk about the Green New Deal for Georgia, I relish and want the opportunity to go to 159 counties and talk about how many jobs have been created with the old, one, we know that there's 9 coal plants either retiring or slated to be closed around Georgia. The economic hit that's gonna be, the economic hit that Milledgeville took in Baldwin County when Plant Branch closed, 40% of their tax base disappeared in 1 year. All right, and so when we talk about a just and equitable transition, it means the communities that have been reliant on fossil fuel and dirty energy, and the ones who have been impacted the most by environmental injustice and energy burden and high utility bills, those should be the first to benefit from this transition to clean energy. And the reality is, it's mostly rural Georgia. There's not enough room in metro Atlanta to put solar. All right, a lot of that's going to be energy efficiency. But out in, whether it's Emmanuel County, even in Richmond County, there's still a lot of rural parts of Richmond County, and certainly the 12, where we're talking about this is the biggest investment they've seen, in a generation. So that's what I want to highlight. Yeah. Excellent. Well, my website's tedforgeorgia.com. I ask for your votes. If you have any more questions, want to volunteer or donate, please go to the website. There's a way to connect there. And then Chris has my cell phone and email, so he can share that with y'all as well. But thank y'all again so much.